So the Cowra Woodland Birds Program has been going now for something like 21, 22 years. And it began in 2001, that's my memory of it. And it began with a phone call, actually, from me, well, from a landholder up there, John Rankin, who is still the chair of the committee, who said he'd been told he was going to lose his grey-crowned babblers. That's my memory. He said eastern yellow robins. So that's how it started. We had Twitchathon money, which helped to start the project off. Next slide would be good, Aaron, thank you. Right, so the 6 woodland birds that we were concerned about right at the beginning are these guys: brown tree creeper, grey-crowned babbler, diamond firetail, black-chinned honeyeater, hooded robin, and speckled warbler. And of course, since then, many birds have been added. But so these 6 species were listed as vulnerable, and now I think 3 of them, the brown tree creeper, hooded robin, and the diamond firetail, are now listed for the southeastern form as either endangered in the case of the hooded robin, or the other 2 are vulnerable in the EPBC Act now. So these were the ones we were concerned about. And as Judy said, the hooded robin appears to have dropped off the list, which is a worry. We have heard reports in other parts of the Cowra Shire that they're still hanging on, and hopefully we will see them again. So next slide, please. So since then, there's been a whole host of birds, including the flame robin and varied satella, that have been added to the vulnerable list in New South Wales, as well as grey-tailed kite, little eagle, dusky wood swallow, and unfortunately the list goes on. Next slide, please. I just need to see, right, okay. So when we started, we realised that when you look at the map of New South Wales, you see that the coast, particularly the south coast, but also the north coast, is quite well protected in terms of how much is preserved of each bioregion. But in Cowra, it was less than 2%. It's probably a little bit more than that now, but not much. So most of it has been cleared, and certainly all the productive land, most of the productive land has been cleared and is in either completely cleared or even if treed in a degraded state. So next slide, please. So when we started, these were where our sites were, and at that time, this was around 2008. We did our first statistics analysis of it, and they recommended that we add some more sites, better woodland sites and sites along the river. So now we have 90 sites that we survey 4 times a year, seasonally. And have done so pretty much since 2001. There's a couple of gaps. COVID really knocked us around. A couple of times there were fires, but basically 4 times a year since 2001, which gives us, it's one of the longest running bird survey of woodland birds in Australia, we understand. The next slide, please. Okay, so our sites vary, obviously. Some of them are absolutely beautiful sites and are just full of birds. The one in the left-hand corner, bottom corner, was a great site, and this is illustrative of something that is happening all through the whole area. It's just an old cemetery, Morongala Cemetery, and it was full of little birds until the noisy miners moved in. And so this is an issue. It's now, we say it's gone over to the dark side, because it's full of noisy miners, and that's becoming an increasingly serious issue. Next slide, please. And so this is what we call a typically degraded site. Some of our sites are like this, and you basically get eastern rosellas, magpies. Maybe you might get Australian pardalote if you're lucky, and pied currawongs, but they're the sorts of birds you get. Basic and noisy miners, of course. So noisy miners tend to dominate these sites and drive all the little birds away, as you probably know. Next slide, please. So these are the birds that we get in the degraded sites, and yeah, the only really little one we ever hear is Australian pardalote. Next slide, please. Right, so I thought I'd just tell you, it gives you an idea. We have done some restoration, and this map shows you down the so up the top it says clover paddock restoration. That was our first planting. And then down the bottom in the brown, it's got iambi restoration. That was a full big restoration that we did. Trees and shrubs, and a mix, all locally native Indigenous species, obviously. In the clover paddock, we did it in blocks rather than in one whole restoration. And the reason I'm showing you this is that we had our last survey last weekend, and Peter and I, my husband and I, surveyed this site, and it was really interesting to see the difference it can make to a cleared paddock when you put some of the habitat back. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the clover paddock. Basically, before we started, we planted in 2005, nothing there but grasses and absolutely no birds. When we surveyed the sites, you would get a couple of magpies and that'd be about it, really. The next slide. So this was 2005, the iambi clover paddock, which was planted in blocks of a mixture of, there were 1,440 plants, 43 plots, and a mixture of 6 box and ironbark species. Next slide, please. Okay, so then this was, let me see what slide that is. Sorry, I just need to get up to date. Right. Okay, sorry, I made some notes and I'm lost. Right. This is in April 2010. Hard to believe, not much growth, but we probably had a drought before then. However, the next one we'll go to is April 2010. Yes, sorry, that was 2007. In April 2010, the trees are growing and the birds have moved back in. So instead of magpies, or as well as magpies, we were starting to see birds like grey striped thrush, yellow rump thornbills, cisticolas, superb fairy wrens, and double-barred finches, as well as red-browed finches. So that was 2010. So we're looking 5 years since the plant. The next slide, please. That shows you just a different view of the plantings. So you can see they're starting to grow and the birds have moved in. Next slide, please. Oh, right. Okay, thank you. Right. So 15. So this was last Sunday, April the 16th, 2023, and we had quite a mix of little birds. They weren't all on site, or they came after time. We do 2 hectare, 20-minute surveys, by the way. So we're getting things like buff rump thornbill, yellow rump thornbill, superb fairy wren, double-barred finches, yellow thornbills, grey striped thrush, grey fantails, rufous whistlers, and black-faced cuckoo shrikes. Basically, well, we probably would have got those before, the last ones, but the little birds, they just simply weren't there, and they've moved back in, and with all the rain, it's looking absolutely beautiful. So the next slide, right. So before we move on, yeah, let's leave that side on. I'll explain that in a minute. As well as the clover paddock, we do survey a control site, and the difference between a control site, which is a completely clear paddock, is extraordinary. None of the little birds are there. We got a few magpies, I think 2 or 3 magpies and a raven and a black-shouldered kite flew over, and that was all we got on the control site where there's been no plantings. Right. Then we decided in 2006, beggars for punishment, we would do a big planting. And this is the day that we planted the big rainforest block in iambi, the property where we're on. So the next slide. Okay, so the next 2 slides will show you what the site looks like now. The next one shows you a different site completely. Okay, and so basically before any of the shrubs had germinated, it would have been very similar to the control site of the clover paddock. There were basically some magpies, and noisy miners would have been in the trees on that lined the side of the restoration site, eastern rosellas, that sort of thing. So last Sunday, grey fantail, double-barred finch, some stubble quail, which was nice, some spotted pardalotes. And the interesting thing is that although the grey currant babblers were not on this site, they've now returned to our original site, which was around the house. They'd left apparently for 7 or 8 years. And so this is a good story. The only downside, of course, is that there is no covenant on it. When we first started and planted, there were really no covenants that you could get for a site that had just been planted, not that we could find anyway. However, a lot of the properties around Cowra are now seeking covenants under the Biodiversity Conservation Trust, and there are big plans to do big mass plantings again, and some of that is using Biodiversity Conservation Trust money to restore the habitat on and near some of our sites. Next slide. As well as that, we do things like we do some promotions, and this is one of our big promotions. This was written by Marette Besk, and many of you will know that Marette died last year, very sadly. She was a linchpin of our program, and we miss her very much. It's still available, it's still been printed, and it's still available in the information centre. Oh, sorry, Judy, you want me, a covenant. A covenant is a protection that is binding. It depends on the covenant you get. The Biodiversity Conservation Trust, the highest one you get is in perpetuity. So those, if they put it on that highest one, they get the most money to manage, and they also get market price when they sell. But it's legally enforceable that is protected forever. It's a very good, in some respects, it's a very good program. Okay, so I just put this in. Oh, the next slide, please. I just put this in. We get lots of superb parrots in Cowra, and this one shows a breeding pair on the Cowra Common. The next slide. Okay, so when we first did the first lot of data analysis, this shows the birds that are stable. The grey crown babbler is stable, which is great, because I think that was the one that John was concerned about, even though he denies it now. Superb parrots have declined, and the diamond firetail and brown tree creeper. There are other declines as well, but these were some of the main ones that they found. Next slide. Before I go on to that, I just wanted to say that we're finding that a whole lot of birds are now declining, and some of the birds that are declining are really surprising. For example, magpies are in slight decline, black-shouldered kite, brown falcon. But some of the ones that are declining are ones you probably, crested shrike-tit, fuscus honeyeater, yellow-tufted honeyeater, restless flycatcher. These ones are all declining. The one that is increasing the most, you will not be surprised to hear, is the noisy miner. And there are moves underway to start culling them. That they've been already starting culling noisy miners, not just in Cowra but in other areas. However, there is mixed success. So the other interesting increases are both the pardalotes are increasing, white-naped honeyeater and grey fantail. So right now, just very quickly, I left this in because we also have given management recommendations to people who don't necessarily want to protect their property but want to increase the bird life on their property while still having a productive farm. How long? Right, okay, sorry, my 15 minutes is up apparently. So these were the sorts of management recommendations. Increase the size of remnants to 10 hectares, leave logs and fallen branches where they fall. Obviously, with the fires and so on, that's not necessarily going to be adhered to. Increase the mid-storey density in areas with less than 20%, but not at the expense of grassy woodlands. Fence off remnants, manage grazing pressure. Grazing pressure is important. If there's too much grazing, there is no understory. Spread revegetation restoration across the dominant vegetation types of the Shire, including the more fertile areas. I don't know that last management recommendation has ever been taken up. So basically, we are continuing, and we hope to keep going, even though one of our issues is that nearly everybody on the management committee is getting on a bit. And would be great to get some new younger people on the committee, plus new younger surveyors. Next, the last day, second last one is our next survey is winter, the 15th and 16th of July. I've taken over from Julian Reid as the survey coordinator. And so anyone who wants to come and survey, you're most welcome. Contact me. There's my email. I will very quickly say some big thank you, particularly to Marette Best, who's no longer with us, but also to John Rankin, Neil Katange and Julian Reid, who've been on the committee pretty much ever since we started and continue to be involved, very much involved in the Cowra Woodland Bird Project. We do hope to continue on into the future, but really does depend on getting some younger people involved. Last slide. You get nice sunsets at Cowra. Thank you very much.